All right, so this is the key to part 2 of section 1.4. So again, you're adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. So number 1, you have these two complex numbers that you're adding together. Remember, a complex number has the form a plus bi. All right, and so you're adding these two complex numbers. So number 1, you have 2 plus 3i plus, and then 12 minus 8i. And so when adding two complex numbers, which is the easier kind, basically you're going to add the real part together. So 2 plus 12 is 20. And then you're going to add the imaginary terms. So 3i and negative 8i. So the imaginary part here is 3 and the imaginary part here is negative 8. So 3i and a negative 8i is a negative 5i. And then it says put it in standard form. And standard form just means a plus bi. So you get 20 minus 5i. Number 2, this time you're subtracting. So you have 6 minus 5i minus, and then 2 plus I. So if you want to, you can use a distributive property here. So you can multiply this by negative 1, and you can multiply this by 1 to get rid of the parentheses. Or you can just change it to addition problem. You just got to remember that to change this to addition problem, you're going to say 6 minus 5i plus, and you're going to take the opposite of all the terms in here. So that's negative 2, and then minus I. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. The opposite of positive I is a negative I. And then you do like number 1. You just combine your real parts and then your imaginary parts. So 6 and a negative 2 is 4. And then a negative 5i and a negative I is a negative 6i. Okay, so that's number, and it's in standard form, so that's number 2. So 4 minus 6i. Okay, number 3, you're multiplying. So you have I times 3i plus 7. So in this case, since you have this one little factor here, and then you have two terms here, you can use the FOIL method. So you're going to say I times 3i is 3i squared, because remember I times I is I squared. And then I times 7 is a positive 7i. Now you got to remember that I squared equals a negative 1. So you got to replace this I squared with negative 1. So that's 3 times negative 1, because that's what I squared is equal to, plus 7i. And so this becomes negative 3 plus 7i. All right, so that's number 3. So negative 3 plus 7i. Okay, number 4, you have negative 3i times 2i minus 9. So same thing, you're going to use the distributive property. So negative 3 times 2i is a negative 6i squared. And a negative 3 times a negative 9 is a positive 27i. You got to remember that I squared is negative 1, so you got to replace this I squared. So that becomes negative 6 times negative 1 plus 27i. And so therefore we get negative 6 times negative 1 is a positive 6 plus 27i. That's number 4. So 6 plus 27i. Number 5, you have 8i times 8 minus 7i. So 8i times 8 minus 7i. So that becomes 8i times 8 is 64i. 8i times negative 7 is a negative 56i squared. Again, you got to remember that I squared is negative 1, so that becomes 64 minus 56 times a negative 1. And then negative 56 times negative 1 is a positive 56, so it becomes 64i plus 56. All right, now remember you got to write it in standard form, so you got to put the real part first. So that will be positive 56 plus 64i. All right, so that's number 5. So 56 plus 64i. Okay, now number 6, you have to use the FOIL method here because you have 2 terms times 2 terms. Just kind of like when you had these polynomials and you had those 2 binomials. So number 6, you have 6 plus 5i times 1 plus 2i. Alright, so using FOIL, So I'm going to take the first term of each binomial. So 6 times 1 is 6. The outer, 6 times 2i is 12i. The inner, 5i times 1 is 5i. And then the last, 5i times 2i is 10i squared. And remember that I squared is equal to negative 1, and I can combine these two terms here. So it becomes 6 plus 17i plus 10 times a negative 1. So then this becomes 6 plus 17i. 10 times a negative 1 is a negative 10. And then combining like terms, combining your constants, I get negative 4 plus 17i. That's number 6. So negative 4 plus 17i. And number 7, you have this. You have 6 minus 4i times 3 minus 2i. So 6 minus 4i times 3 minus 2i. So again, using a fall method, 6 times 3 is 18. The outer, 6 times negative 2i is a negative 12i. The inner, 4i times 3 is a negative 12i. And then the last, a negative 4i times a negative 2i is a positive 8i squared. Alright, combine like terms and replace i squared. I get 18, a negative 12i, and a negative 12i is a negative 24i, plus 8 times a negative 1. Remember, I squared is equal to negative 1, so you got to replace it. So then this becomes 18 minus 24i, and then minus 8. And then combining like terms, 18 minus 8 is 10, so I get 10 minus 24i. So that's number 7, 10 minus 24i. Okay, number 8, you have this binomial squared. So let's see number 8. So number 8, you have 2 minus 7i squared. Okay, you got to remember that 2 minus 7i means 2 minus 7i times itself. Okay, so now you can use a fall method. So I get 2 times 2 is 4. The outer, 2 times a negative 7i is a negative 14i. Negative 7 times 2 is a negative 14i. And remember, just like you did with polynomials, that when you square a binomial and use a fall method, the outer and the inner should be identical. And then a negative 7i times a negative 7i is a positive 49i squared. All right, combine like terms and replace the I squared. I get 4 minus negative 14i, and negative 14i is a negative 28i, plus 49 times a negative 1. So then this becomes 4 minus 28i, and then positive 49 times negative 1 is a negative 49. Combine like terms, I get negative 45 minus 28i. So that's number 8. So negative 45 minus 28i. Okay, number 9. Okay, so number 9, this is what you have. You have 12 plus 3i times 12 minus i. So 12 plus 3i times 12 minus i. Again, you use a fall method here. 12 times 12 is 144. The outer is a negative 12 times negative I is a negative 12i. The inner, 12i times 3 is 36i. And then last, positive 3i times a negative I is a negative 3i squared. Combine like terms and replace I squared. I get 144. A negative 12i and a positive 26i is a positive 24i. And then this becomes minus 3 times a negative 1, because remember I squared equals a negative 1. So then this becomes 144 plus 24i, and then a negative 3 times a negative 1 is a positive 3. Combine like terms, I get, these are constants, so I can combine them, so I get 147 plus 24i. So 147 plus 24i, so that's this one. And then finally, that's this one. So finally, number 10, you have, number 10, you have negative 2 plus I times negative 3 minus I. So negative 2 plus I times negative 3 minus I. So again, follow method. Negative 2 times negative 3 is a positive 6. The outer, negative 2 times a negative I, is a positive 2I. The inner, I times negative 3 is a negative 3I. And the last, I times a negative I is a negative I squared. Combine like terms, and remember that I squared is negative 1. I get 6. 2I minus 3I is a negative I. Minus, and then that I squared, remember, is a negative 1. So replace I squared with negative 1. So then this becomes 6 minus I. Subtracting a negative 1 means adding the opposites. That becomes plus 1. Subtract negative 1 means adding 1. And so adding your constants, which are like terms, I get 7 minus I. All right, so that's number 10. So 7 minus I. Oops, right here. Number 10, 7 minus I. All right, so that takes care of part 2 of section 1.4.